I was running out of time. All my friends and family were telling me, this is insane, no one's going to give you 50 grand to climb a mountain. I was getting rejections all the time on the phone. You know, I was getting injuries from training. It felt like this just avalanche of crap falling on me all the time.
Bonita Norris, the youngest British woman to climb Everest at 29,000 feet and also the youngest British female to ski to the North Pole.
The morning that I decided to actually explore Everest, and I really did feel like there were suddenly two paths in front of me. It was like either get up and go downstairs, make your Cocoa Pops, have another day where nothing changes, or explore this whole new idea, this ridiculous world where I'm going to fail. Obviously I'm going to fail, but I just realised that I couldn't.
So welcome to another episode of Screw It, Just Do It, where today I'm joined by Bonita Norris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Lovely intro.
You're welcome, you're welcome. So I wanted to kick things off by asking, was climbing ever remotely on your radar growing up as a kid, as a teen?
No, because it was just not something that I had ever been exposed to. You know, I'd never seen a mountaineer, I'd never watched anything about climbers, certainly never been to a mountain. But as I got older, when we were in year 6, so I must have been 12, we went on a week away with the school. And it was, you know, in Wales, and it was wearing hiking boots and carrying heavy backpacks, and it was raining, and it was the best week of my life, and I absolutely loved it. And I couldn't understand why all my friends hated it. The blisters and, you know, the long days and the conditions. And then again, when I was 18, I went off to South America before uni, and I climbed Machu Picchu, did the Inca Trail. And I remember writing in my blog on whatever website it was. I think my mum was the only reader of my blog. But I remember writing it, that was the best day of my life. And so it was always there in my subconscious, but never consciously.
Interesting. Oh, one of these people always wanted to have been to Machu Picchu, but I've never. South America is, I think, the only continent I haven't been to that I want to go to. Yeah. So following, or when you were at uni, was there a plan you were following? Like what degree were you doing? What was that going to lead to? Or were you like me and a lot of other people just going along for the ride?
I was like you. I went to uni to study media arts. I was at Royal Holloway. I mean, media arts was like TV production, learning to produce, direct, film, edit. I was terrible at all of those things, but the only thing that I did like was the writing. And so I figured that maybe after uni I would try and go into journalism or something like that. But honestly, I literally had no idea. And what I wanted to do would change every week. So to the point where my friends would just roll their eyes because it was like, oh yeah, what's she up to now?
Really? No
yeah.
So then tell me about the lecture you attended at university with a speaker who had climbed Everest a number of times. Who was that?
Yeah, it was two actually. It was Rob Casserly and Kenton Cool, and it was at the Royal Geographical Society. And didn't really know what to expect. Went along and just listened as they told this amazing story. And by the end of it, my jaw was on the floor. You know, I knew that was what I wanted to do, but even though that kind of fire had been ignited inside, it was still a case of, well, you know, you go out and you go back to your normal life as soon as you leave the room, because that's ridiculous. Like, people like me don't climb Everest.
And did you go back from that and tell all your friends, your family? Were you kind of like really enthused?
Not straight away. No, because it was such a private thing. It was a ridiculous, you know, it was mortifyingly embarrassing that I'd even considered that I would do that.
Okay.
Like, literally the next day I was like, that was, you know, the fact that I came home thinking, oh, one day I'm going to climb Everest. It was, put that to bed. It's never going to happen. It was just those limiting beliefs, I guess, just like pushing my dreams to the back of my head.
Yeah.
It wasn't for about 3 months that I sort of actually woke up one morning and thought, this won't go away. I can't ignore this any longer. Yeah.
And in those intervening months then, had you gone out to like read up on it or anything like that? When
I decided that I wanted to actually take it seriously, I Google was my friend. I also contacted Kenton and Rob, and actually got to like interview Rob Castley for my school, university newspaper and stuff. So I was straight away, because of the internet, it was really easy to get in touch with these people, and they were like, "Yeah, you could climb Everest," and that was an insane thing to be told, and it went from there really.
I was going to say, is that, as I always say in this show, one of those screw it, just do it moments where all of a sudden, the clouds parted and you saw this was actually a real living, breathing thing that could be
completely
done.
When I remember specifically the morning that I decided to actually explore Everest, and I really did feel like there were suddenly two paths in front of me. It was like, either get up and go downstairs, make your Cocoa Pops, have another day where nothing changes, or explore this whole new idea, this ridiculous world where I'm going to fail. Obviously I'm going to fail, but I just realized that I couldn't keep shutting it out any longer, and I was going to go down the other path, and didn't know what to expect. But yeah, that was the moment, and I don't think a day from that morning waking up I didn't do anything towards getting to the top of the world.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing. Did you carry on eating Cocoa Pops?
Who doesn't love Cocoa Pops?
So up to that point, just remind us then, what was the highest thing that you'd climbed prior to Everest? Was it just hiking up Machu Picchu?
Yeah, it was Machu Picchu. So I'd been up to 4.8 thousand meters, 4,800 meters. So I knew that I really enjoyed it. But that's not climbing.
I was going to say, it sounds a lot when you go, I'm a snowboarder, and you think that sounds pretty high, but then you go Everest, which I didn't know until I looked at this, 29,000 feet.
Yeah.
It was like, whoa.
Yeah, nearly double the height of Machu Picchu. It's 8,848 meters, or
Right,
it was
okay.
before the earthquake.
Yeah, okay. If you're enjoying this podcast, can I ask you to do one thing for me? That is to hit the subscribe button. On average, we have just 10% of people who listen to this podcast actually subscribe to it. If you subscribe to it, not only will you be the first person to be notified as soon as any brand new content goes live, it also means that we can go out and get even better guests for the show for you to enjoy. So just take 15 seconds of your time just to hit that subscribe button, and I'll be eternally grateful. Thank you very much. When you kind of look back, join the dots, those two guys were the inspiration for you doing it. Did you then go on and find out about everyone else who's done that and were inspired by other people who'd been on similar journeys?
Yeah. One of them, Tori James, the first Welsh woman to climb Everest. And I remember sending her a very stalkerish Facebook message saying, I want to be you. I think I'm in love with you. And she was also the youngest British woman at the time.
Yeah.
She was in her late 20s when she reached the summit of Everest. And I realised that if I could climb Everest before then, I would take her record. So that was it too. It's like, I want to take your record. Can you give me some advice? God knows why she responded, but she did. And when she met me in person, she said, you will climb that mountain. And that was, again, like another like, whoa, like these are people who've actually been and done it. And I got the sense that we were strangers, of course. Like, she didn't know what I was capable of, but there was a sense of sisterhood in that moment, I think she knew that it was going to be tough, and she was like, you will do it. And she was right in the end, but I think because of her words in some ways.
I was going to say that's really interesting, isn't it? And it reminds me of something like a teacher said to me, when somebody takes an interest in you like that and actually believes in you, compared to like the kind of stock answer that you might get, especially from maybe your friends or family, just like yes of course you will type thing. What do you think that is that fires in us when somebody actually takes that interest, shares that belief, even though they're a complete stranger? Do you think that just comes from their place of total and utter confidence in themselves, that if they could do it, well then anyone could do it?
I think I certainly feel like that when I'm passing on advice. I think, like, if I can do it, like, Alex, you could climb Everest if I can do it. I think there was a sense with Tori that she knew that it was going to be really hard, and she knew perhaps those were the words that she wanted to hear when she was starting out. And I was lucky enough, when I got back from Everest, I got the Facebook messages from young women saying, I want to be you, I want to take your record. And what a privilege it was to sit down with one of them and say, you will climb that mountain. And indeed she did, and she took my record.
Oh, really?
So,
Amazing.
you know,
Yeah,
it's great to be able to pass that on.
Yeah. Okay. Do you enjoy that?
Absolutely, yeah.
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 I find that fascinating, and it's, you know, not remotely the same, but when I ran a marathon last year, did the New York Marathon. People, you know, standard response, I could never run a marathon. You're like, well, actually you could, but what is it that automatically makes you say, I can't do that? Yeah. Then you go, well, actually, you know, pretty much anyone could run a marathon if you literally ran it slow enough and you ate the right things, you drank the right things, you actually did some training for it. But some people look at it as you're putting obstacles in their way to start with. You know, and it's, again, as you say, it's those kind of limiting beliefs that...
Yeah. I think we put other people on pedestals, and we think you have to be superhuman to do that.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be super fit. And actually, they aren't. They've just, like, gone through the process.
Yeah. It was interesting. A former guest of the show, actually, has become a friend of mine. I met up with him twice last week, actually. Jay Morton, who's on like SES Who Dares Wins, and is part of NIM's Expert, forgotten the name of his
Elite
company.
Expert.
Elite Expert, yeah. So he you know, we're just having lunch. Said, yeah, I think I'll summit Everest for the 3rd time next year. We're just like talking about plans for the year, and you're like, just in like normal conversation, you know, and it's just like really interesting how somebody's mindset is different once they've accomplished certain things. Yeah. But in the same sentence, how then doubt creeps in from other areas of their life, and you know, him sharing like where you're sat now, that what he's scared of is never fulfilling his full potential.
Because you could just go and climb Everest for the rest of your life. Yeah, what else is out there?
Yeah,
yeah, it's funny.
It was an interesting conversation. Yeah. What are you scared of, by the way? Clearly not scared of heights.
Well, I think that's quite an existential thing, isn't it? To never fulfill your potential. I mean, what's your potential? The idea of it is limitless, right? So
yeah, exactly.
You can never fulfill it. But what am I afraid of? Oh my gosh. In a similar way, I think I know that I've got lots of ideas bubbling away, and you know, if I was to wake up in 20 years' time and have procrastinated and not actually made them happen, I would be really angry with myself. But what a privileged fear to have, really. I mean, I think, you know, for all of us at the moment, it's like, can you just get through this cost of living situation we're in, and like that, those kind of basic fears occupy too much time. But and then there's the other thing, which is I want to go back to the mountains, and I want to climb the big ones. Yeah. And I want to really push myself in that way. But my absolute biggest fear is, you know, my kids not growing up without mum as well. So it's just, I'm so torn over it.
Interesting. I was going to say to you, do you still feel that calling?
Yeah.
To the mountains? Yeah.
Yeah. But never in a sort of, I want to take risk. You know, I don't like this thing of dicing with death and pushing those limits. I want to be in the mountains because I just love being in the mountains. Yeah. If I could have that guarantee that I would survive, it would be so much better. But you just can't. Like, that's the trade-off for getting to go to these rare, these wild places, and I get that. So it's going to be a journey for sure, getting back into them in the years to come, because my son is 7 months old at the moment. So
I was going to say with that, remind me again how a lot to do an expedition. Obviously, there's training involved to get back to a certain level of fitness for the mountains, etc., cardiovascular and all the rest of it. But what kind of timescale are you talking to do something like?
If I wanted to go on an expedition, you'd be looking at the seasons. So, okay, what mountains are there in the spring? It's sort of Nepal, Himalayas, and then in the summer it's moving towards Tibet, like Choyu, for instance, and K2 in Pakistan, and then in the autumn you've got other 8,000ers in Nepal. So I would, if I was, thinking, right, today I'm going to climb a big mountain next year, I'd probably would say the spring is too soon, but summer or autumn. And there's, Choyu in Tibet would be like the number one I'd want to go back to and climb. Okay. 6th highest in the world. It would be quite fun. Yeah. But maybe take the kids with me. I don't know.
And how long would you be away to do something like that?
I think the expeditions are getting shorter all the time. The longest I've ever been on was we got to the top 2 months after we'd left home. So
Oh,
it was like
really?
2.5 months.
So I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, like 4, 5, 6 months. But then I
Oh,
have
no.
seen Nims's. I mean,
Yeah.
that's obviously another level entirely to climb all those peaks in that period of time. And was it you mentioned beating the record that was already there? Was it therefore the intention to break that record? Was it extra motivation behind the climb?
It was. It wasn't for me really a personal motivation because it's kind of meaningless.
Yeah, yeah.
But definitely getting sponsorship to go and climb the mountain, it was like fundamental, really. You need to have a hook if you want to get a corporate sponsor, and I luckily just had this one. So it was so important at the same time.
I was going to say, because it's not cheap to go and do something
No.
like that. It comes at a considerable cost.
Yeah.
When Jay was telling me how much people pay to come on their expeditions, and I had no idea.
How much?
It
is today, so
yeah, it was something like from like 35,000 pounds to do it, and it was just again really interesting hearing the real variety of people who would do that, but a lot had some kind of military adventure background already.
I mean, 35 grand is I'm so surprised because when I did it, I think the just the expedition was like 42,000, and then with all your insurance, equipment, flights, etc., it came to like 50 grand, and that was 13 years ago. So
Okay.
I think because of
He'd probably give you a better answer than me.
well,
but yeah.
no, but because he's working with NIMS, and you know these Nepalese businesses that have started up trading, they are obviously a lot cheaper than the Western companies doing it. So yeah, it has become more accessible, hasn't it? And that's why we've seen all these queues.
Yeah. Tell me, when you've obviously got the physical side of training for something like that. Did you employ any other techniques? And I'm thinking like visualization, anything like that.
Yeah.
Did you?
Visualization was huge. When there was for me a 6-month period really where I'd gone out to the Himalayas just after I graduated, and at that point I'd been climbing for about a year, and I'd got to the fourth summit of the world's 8th highest peak, and at that point I knew physically I'm good to go for Everest. If I can climb this mountain, Everest is only a few hundred meters higher. And at that point it was, the team that I'd climbed that peak with were like, yeah, we're on for Everest. That's in 6 months' time in the spring of 2010. And it's going to be 50 grand. So you've got to basically find that money and get fit for the mountain in 6 months. And so for me, had to find a corporate sponsor, had to get fit, had a job as well. And visualization, I'd say, was really actually like one of the things that probably stopped me from giving up completely.
Really?
Because I was making
Interesting.
cold calls to businesses and sending out this sponsorship brochure I'd made. And, cold calling is soul destroying sometimes. Like, people are rude, you get the phone put down on you. You want to have a meaningful conversation, but you can never get past that first person. And you just feel like you're banging your head against the wall. And those phone calls just felt like mountains in the end. Like, I can't bear the idea of picking up the phone again. And then I would think, okay, but what do I give up on by not picking up the phone? And I would think about getting to the top of Everest with my team, seeing the curvature of the earth. And then I'd think, oh my God, I can't give up on that. And so it was that every night going to sleep, visualizing Everest, I would be like, I'm going to try again tomorrow. I'm going to try and find that money again tomorrow. And it kept me going, yeah.
And I'm always interested in this because I'm pretty good at manifesting. My wife always says it, literally whatever I think about, I like manifest it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to visualization, for whatever reason, I really struggle to visualize anything. And again, it's not remotely what I would want to visualize, but Andy Frizella, who owns a company called First Form, big protein company in the States, and he was on his podcast. He was talking about, he's literally going, I visualized the the type of leather that was in the private jet and and I was like not remotely interested in visualizing for private jet, but when he was actually talking about this is what it felt like when I touched it, and this is what the sound made as I walked up the steps, and I was just like, that how do you do that? I can't do that.
I couldn't do that either.
Right,
no,
okay.
No, definitely that is another level.
That detail. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, that's good to hear.
I mean, I'm impressed, but like I would be thinking like, surely there's something better to do with your time, not like. But I think it's really key. You've got to have a really clear vision about what you're working towards, because you're suffering so much to get there. Like the nitty gritty, the small things, they will beat you down.
Yeah.
I was running out of time. All my friends and family were telling me, this is insane. No one's going to give you 50 grand to climb a mountain. I was getting rejections all the time on the phone. You know, I was getting injuries from training. It felt like this just avalanche of crap falling on me all the time, and still I managed to kind of keep on the straight and narrow and keep going, just trusting that it would work out if I didn't give up on that image for me of just getting to the top of the world. And the visualization, the dream of that summit was nothing like the reality of getting there. It was so much better in some ways thinking about it than actually standing there
really?
In the end. Yeah, but that's the power of it. And then on the mountain, actually, it was so important to visualize everything that could go wrong. And that's another thing that people like, for instance, I've had 2 home births, and part of the hypnobirthing thing that you go through with home births is don't think about anything bad that could happen.
Right.
Which was a complete like removal for me from everything I'd been taught about. Go through everything bad that can happen, so that if it does happen, you've already been through it and you know exactly how to react. So I would visualize on the mountain, I'm stepping out the tent, I'm doing this, you know, when I get to this point, this is what I'll do. It was so important for keeping calm and so visualizing the good and the bad.
Yeah, okay, how interesting. Interesting to share, to be like a future episode, but I interviewed a guy called Stas Stasica last week, who's one of the co-founders of Through Dark, the high performance clothing brand, and it's just done the SAS Who Dares Wins Australia series.
Yeah.
And he was talking about like the hardest thing, you know, he'd been through a lot of hard things in his life, but he said the hardest above all was selection for the Royal Marines, and saying, you know, he was ill, but he was, you know, refused to throw the towel in and make anyone see that he was giving up, and they're just like beasting them, you know. And he said to be able to take my mind away to another place, and I said I get that. I remember doing the marathon and like, you know, literally trying to physically put different pain points in my body into boxes so that they weren't there anymore, you know, to shuffle them away.
Right.
And he was like, what I do is I actually think about doing something in detail. So he goes, I built my dream house. Because I built my dream house while I was doing that. I was like putting the flooring in, I was choosing the colours, painting the walls, and I was like, never heard of that. That's crazy.
That is something that I have spent time doing in the mountains. Something to take your mind off the pain of the present moment. And it's nothing like what he would have been going through. But yeah, for sure, when you've got like a 10-hour day or night climb, and it's nice to just go away in your head and build the dream home rather than suffer through the reality of the situation.
So we'll come back to what it was like when you got there. That's an interesting one. But what do you do to, you know, immediately to start action that vision? You obviously hit the phones was one thing. You got to raise that money. How did you land that sponsor in the end? Then what was the straw that broke the camel's back from all of these people you were calling? What made that one person go, we'll do it?
So I didn't really get anywhere with the whole cold calling. A few companies are contacted, and a few people tried to help me, like, you know, maybe my boss will. And so I'd had a few meetings, and it would get so far, you start to get excited, and then it would just come to nothing. And one day, though, I did email a company called Vocalink, and they actually rang me back, which never happened. And they were like, come for a meeting. Went for the meeting. As I walked into the meeting room, the door slammed on my hand, which had a cup of tea in it, and like I spilled the entire cup of tea down my dress, and I'm sitting in this meeting with like smouldering skin, you know, this literally like a 2nd-degree burn. and just trying to kind of think, this is the most important 10 minutes of your life, like hold it together. You can take yourself to A&E after if you need to. And they, you know, they were very interested, but they didn't have all the money. So, you know, it's like, okay, that it's great, but it doesn't actually get me to the mountain at all. A few weeks after that, I was still just trying to find other sponsors or you know, desperately searching for an answer. And one morning, in fact, the night before this particular morning, I'd had a phone call from our leader, Kenton, who basically said, like, come on, Bonita, like, you haven't paid us the money. You said you were going to, like, you've made this whole story about you've got the cash and you're going to send it over. And I just didn't. And so he was like, you've got to send the money by the end of the week. Money that I did not have.
Indeed.
So sleepless night for me. And the next morning, I just remember thinking, what's the point? Like, why am I going to get up today and go training for a mountain I'm not going to climb?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to find the money in 5 days if I haven't found it in 5 months. But, you know, as I was lying in bed thinking that, there was this other voice in my head saying, like, get up. Like, this is Everest. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it, you know? And I just remember thinking, this is the last time. Like, tomorrow I quit. Like, this is the last go. And that morning I drove to work. On the way to work, I would stop by this woodland where I live and run around the woods. Bit of training.
Yeah.
And that day, driving to the woods, this idea came to me, call a radio station. Like, if you get on a radio station live on air, then it's like the ultimate cold call. There's more than one person listening.
True.
And I phoned up Capital FM, and the producer agreed to let me go live on air with Johnny Vaughan and Lisa Snowdon, who presented it at the time. And I can't remember a word that was said in that interview. But, you know, when it was over, I thought, like, tick, good start to the day. Like, nothing will come of it, but carry on. Went for my run, got back to the car, and there was the call from Vocalink, the marketing director, Mark. And he said, like, heard you on the radio. That was cool. Actually, we can see it now. Like, this whole thing that if you become the youngest British woman to climb that mountain, it's going to be a huge story in the press. And we've changed our minds. We want to give you all the money, every penny you need to go and climb your mountain, as long as, you know, you mention Vocalink. And I was like, I will tattoo that on my forehead if you give me the cash.
You had it removed.
Yeah. Luckily, they didn't put that in the contract. But it was the best moment of my life. Like, seeing my bank balance come up a week later and it said £50,012 or something like that. Yeah.
So you could literally screenshot that or send that to the
Kenton. paid
Right.
the team, and it was like, you know, nothing. It was like, oh, here's the money. Like, sorry, it's a bit late. Like, no idea of the stress that had gone through, because I didn't want them to know that, you know, it was touch and go for me.
Yeah. Well, like you say, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, wouldn't they?
Well, of course, some people can write that check. And I arrived at base camp, you know, and there were a lot of people there that were just, oh, I'm just taking a sabbatical from work. And I was like, wow, geez, like, I don't know how I got here, but somehow I'm surrounded by all these, like, rich people, basically, and people that were not at that at all, real climbers who had saved up or gotten sponsored like me. But that's a different world you realise that you're going into.
Right. And talking about preparation, like action as well, how many other climbs or expeditions did you do before Everest?
So I did an expedition to the Himalayas. I climbed the world's 8th highest peak, Mount Manaslu, which is only a few hundred metres shorter than Everest. So I'd been, you know, on a big mountain. I knew what it was like in the dead zone. I'd worn the supplemental oxygen. I'd seen the big avalanches, you know, climbed across the crevasses. And to get to Manaslu, there was a few climbing trips in the Alps. And to get to the Alps, there was lots of climbing trips in the UK.
Yeah.
And indeed, right up until the moment I went, I was, you know, every weekend I could, going to North Wales to climb. And so by the time I got to Everest, you know, I hadn't just climbed a tree, as you said in your intro.
And what's it like for somebody who's going snowboarding in about 3 days' time? What is it like seeing an avalanche? I've never seen an avalanche.
If it's far away, it's kind of like, oh, look at that avalanche.
Yeah.
It's when it's close enough that you you look at your teammate and you see the terror in their eyes, and you know that you've got the same expression, and you both jump away from the sound, what's that going to do?
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
I've been so close to big avalanches that I've just seen in my teammates' eyes like we're going to die, and we
Really?
haven't.
Really?
Yeah. So I've never
No
been
way.
nose to nose with one, luckily.
Mm.
But I've laid in a tent and heard a huge avalanche come past on K2, and just laid there thinking, this is it, like that's the end. And I was away in the summer with my husband. We were in Indonesia, and there's got earthquakes there. And there was quite a big earthquake on pretty much our last night. The room was shaking. It was quite like this big noise. And he completely freaked out. And I was like, I don't know why this hasn't scared me, but I think it might have something to do with the fact that this is nothing like the fear of an avalanche.
Yeah.
And it's an insanely scary, overpowering noise, wall of sound, and hopefully just far enough away that there's that few extra seconds when you're like, I'm still alive, therefore it's probably okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw this. I was chatting about it with my friends. This clip the other day. You know, once you start, you're going snowboarding, so you start watching more snowboarding clips on Instagram and all the rest of it. And it was, one of these, extreme skiers being filmed by, I'm guessing a drone, maybe it was a helicopter or whatever. And the snow breaks into a couple of pieces, and then one is coming right behind him, and he does a backflip as he's escaping the avalanche, and you're just like, what is going through your head at that moment in time that you would think of doing something like that?
Just in flow, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the avalanches that we'd get in the Himalayas aren't like powder avalanches. They are pieces of ice, blocks of ice that have been on that mountain for thousands of years, like these huge seracs that will just suddenly like explode, and like tons of these like solid blocks of ice come crashing down. So
that's scarier than a powder
well, both can kill you, right?
Yeah, you get
but they're
smothered
very different types.
Yeah. And an earthquake, like the first time you experience that, is a scary. I remember being in Japan and in a bar, and the first question is like, how much have I had to drink? And then you literally see the barman trying to grab every bottle behind the bar. So it is a strange one, and then you realise everything's moving.
Yeah,
really odd. So tell us that climb then to Everest, expectation versus reality.
Oh, I mean, the climb was just exceeded expectations in every way. It was like every day waking up and feeling like the luckiest person in the world. Like how, before you even open your eyes, you can hear the sounds of the mountain. You can hear teammates around you and in the morning, and it's amazing. Like such a privilege to be there. But getting to the summit was just bizarre because there wasn't really a view. It was quite cloudy.
Right.
And in my dream of getting to the summit, I was going to get there and see the curvature of the earth. And there wasn't that at all.
Right.
And you're exhausted. Your brain has had hours and hours in the dead zone where it's just not getting enough oxygen. So I was hallucinating. My teammates were sort of semi-hallucinating as well. And it's just this hyper-real, weird moment. And then there was a Sherpa as well on the summit of Everest who had taken off his oxygen mask, and he was smoking.
That's just
nuts.
It
was a bit like
starve yourself of oxygen, why don't you?
I think they call it Sherpa oxygen, the cigarettes.
Oh, funny.
But it was this bizarre moment where you're like, oh my gosh, you're like top of the world, and this guy's like, done it 10 times, love. No big deal. It really puts your achievement into perspective. And you're there for 10 minutes on the top, rummaging around for your camera, trying to get these pictures. There have been many other summits for me where I've really been present and just taken it in and been so excited to get there. But Everest was just bizarre, considering how long I'd spent building up to this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember saying to Jay Morton when I had a chat with him, what was it, like when he got there with the only person there, and he said these two guys kind of stepped away and I kind of stepped up, and I did have that thought in my head going, I am literally, for want of a better word, on top of the world, higher than any other human on the planet. He went, and then I just carried on.
Yeah. You can't, it's too much for the human brain to take in.
Yeah.
these kind of moments. Yeah.
It's like seeing at a different level again, because it's very touristy, but to see the Grand Canyon and trying to actually get your head around what that is and just the sheer vastness of it at that moment is a difficult one to take in, I think.
Yeah.
Tell me about K2 then, and what that experience was like, and then let's chat about the North Pole one as well. But what was K2 like? Because I guess you've experienced a whole gamut of emotions and different experiences with your climbing.
There was no helicopter off K2. You can't be helicoptered off K2. I was at base camp for a few days, and then I managed to get on a helicopter that was going out.
Okay.
You've got to get yourself off that mountain. Like no one's coming to rescue you. It's very different climbing in the Karakoram in Pakistan, different from the Himalayas. The mountains are like jagged shark teeth. They are so pointy, so beautiful, but just otherworldly. And an amazing trek from Skardu, or this place from Skardu called Ascoli. You start walking for like a week into the kind of belly of the mountains, and you just feel like with every day that passes, civilization is further and further away. There's just nothing there. It's not like trekking to Everest base camp where there's tea houses and villages all the way up until, just below base camp.
Right.
This is not like that. You are, you are completely in the wilderness, and it's amazing, but it also feels like the mountains are sort of closing in on behind you. And
really,
to get back out again, what kind of experience are you going to have before you're spat back out and go back to civilization? So you're contending with that kind of mental side of it, of just being okay with disappearing into the belly of the beast, if you like. And then getting onto K2, I mean, after the walk to base camp, I was already like, right, I need to like collect myself, because it felt dangerous walking to base camp. We're crossing glaciers, crossing crevasses. You'd look down the crevasse, there'd be a dead donkey down it that slipped in. Think, okay, maybe like let's just be a bit more careful, because you sort of, just think that you're not going to die on the walk-in, but you can if you slipped. And then we settle everything at base camp. I walk up to what we call crampon point, which takes another couple of hours. And again, to just get to the point where we put on our crampons and get all of our equipment on. That is a really dangerous walk through a kind of ice fall at the bottom. And I remember again thinking, like, if this was Everest, like, we would be fully kitted up. Right. But you're just it's just another level. And then you start climbing the mountain, and it's really steep, pretty straightforward down the bottom. As you get higher, you start to go through these chimneys and gullies and things like that, which make the climbing really interesting. And I really loved it because you have to actually use your hands to climb, and that was fun. I love, I'm a terrible rock climber, but that was my background, was in rock climbing before. That was how I trained really originally. And and then so all this really exciting climbing, beautiful mountain, lots of avalanches. And then got up to sort of Camp 2 on the peak, and felt like my head was going to explode. Right. I could see like the veins, the capillaries in my eyelids when I shut my eyes. Everything just felt like it was going to burst. And we had a doctor on our team who's just said to me, "You need to go down now. Like, okay, like it's getting dark. We're going to have to stay the night here, but you need to go down in the morning." And that was the worst night. I just, you feel like your head's in a vice, basically.
Really?
It's where your brain starts to swell inside your skull because your brain's not getting enough oxygen. So it swells up to increase its surface area to take more red blood cells and it's very dangerous. And the reason you get it is by going up too quickly. Yeah. Okay. Which is exactly what I had done, because my ego was way too big, and I wanted to, show my team that I was quick and strong and whatever else, and then massively paid for it. And so the next day I remember just getting ready very slowly and stepping out the tent, and I remember like looking out toward the route. The camp was just off the route, and I was thinking it's maybe 50 steps. And then it's the whole way back down the mountain and all the way back to base camp. It's like a massive day with my head feeling like this. I thought, I can't do it. I cannot even take maybe 2 steps. But there's that other voice in your head which has been well trained over the years, like screaming at you, yes, you effing will. Get out the tent, go, one foot in front of the other. And by 5 minutes later, you're in a rhythm and you're doing it.
Yeah.
So that was me. And I got back down. And was like still not in a great way, but much better, but just worried really about what damage had been done.
Yeah.
And so that's when I made the decision, like I'm gonna call a helicopter and I'm gonna get to a hospital, and then the weather was bad, so we had to wait like 3 or 4 days. So
is anyone helping you at this point? Or are you pretty much
not down the mountain? No, I mean, like,
no way.
You've got to climb down. There's no one can. You know,
No
I've
one
got to carry
takes
my
you
stuff.
down. Yeah.
No. I mean, we were all intending to climb down anyway, because we were going to go and try and sort of tag as high as we could. Like sometimes that's what you do, where you wake up in the morning from your camp and you try and climb a little bit higher before coming back down to base camp. And these rotations we do many times before we go to the summit. But, you know, that day everyone decided to come down anyway. So my teammates were, you know, 20 meters above me, 20 meters below me, and so they're there, but you know, you've got to get yourself down. And I was very aware of that. I'd had experiences where I had needed a lot more help, and I don't ever want, you know, someone to need to help me in a mountain. Yeah. So, yeah.
And then tell me about becoming the youngest British woman to ski to the North Pole.
That was great. I mean, very different to climbing. You know, in the mountains, I didn't appreciate the view changes all the time. At the North Pole, the sun goes around you in a circle, never rising, never falling. And it's completely flat. And the view does not change.
Wow.
Day or night.
You don't even think of that, like, you know, outsider looking in, you don't think that that's what the sun does and the view doesn't change. Yeah.
So, like, you imagine like the sunrises and sunsets on Everest and the stars at night, and, you know, as you climb, the view changes. When you're at a pole, you are skiing over the flat, vast, white expanse, and nothing changes. And even when we got to the pole, our leader Alan got out his GPS and he was like, "Okay, left a bit, forward a bit. Okay, we're here, guys! Yay!" And it was sorry if I just peeked the microphone, but you know, there's that thing of when you get to the summit of a mountain, like it's this moment you're like you're on the top, whereas that was bizarre. And it's as you're standing on the sea ice at the North Pole, the sea ice is moving, so it's taking you away from the pole, so you have to keep like skiing back over to it, and it was a very bizarre thing in that way. And I was really glad. I mean, it's amazing to have done it, to have used those cold weather skills I'd learned in the mountains and transfer them to that, but it made me think, I'm a climber. I want to go back to the mountains. Yeah.
So what made you set that as a challenge?
It was basically coming away from Everest and going, I've got all these skills now, and who doesn't, you know, if you had the skills, who wouldn't, in my mind, want to go and use them to like ski to the North Pole? How amazing is that? So it just seemed like a good next step. And Alan Chambers, the guy that organised the trip, he was a friend as well. So that also helped. You know, he was like, "Come on." And it was a great expedition, but for sure, nothing like climbing for me. And
just remembering now, going back to the sponsor for Everest, what was the press like off the back of that? Because that was, 10 years ago?
Crazy.
Right, okay.
It was coming back to the airport and going through the doors at arrivals and having cameras in my face. It was people journalists calling my parents in the middle of the night. It was people outside our house. It was the most insane media storm, and amazing. You know, my sponsor Vocalink, they worked so hard and they did such a great job. We got them, like, I think it was worked out £1.3 million worth of free advertising.
Wow.
So it was, they did.
Because you can equate that, can't you, with the coverage per,
what they'd have had to have paid for it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that translated for them, whether it gave them any kind of real return, but to get that much free advertising was probably worth the initial
Yeah.
investment in me. So I was very proud of them. Like, huge risk on me, huge risk.
Yeah.
But it worked out, huge reward. Sometimes those gambles work.
And what did you think of that experience? Having just watched a bunch of those Netflix documentaries of like Beckham, Robbie Williams, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to get, you know, that kind of attention imagine that on a regular basis. Yeah.
Well, the thing was, before I'd gone to Everest, I was banging down doors,
Yeah.
trying to get people to listen. No one was interested. No one thought that she was ever going to do it. So, like, let's just not give her attention. And then when I came back, I was exhausted, kind of confused as well, very low actually. After the mountain, I missed my team. I'd also injured myself when I come back down, and I was feeling all sorts of things about that, like, you know, success from the summit, but also failure, and to come back to that media storm and have people throwing questions at you. I hadn't processed anything at that point. And my family being like, Bonnie, what's going on? Like, this is crazy. What's happened? There was no time to just go back to family and be like, I'm alive. Like, we're all good. It was, but I wouldn't change any of it, because I really wanted to make sure that we made the most of the opportunity that we had with VocalLink to, like, get it out there and prove that, you know, their investment in me was something that I took seriously. And so it was great, but at the same time, like, it does give me appreciation now. Like, you don't realize when you read something on the Daily Mail website and it says so and so who lives, you know, Alex, who lives in a £750,000 house in Dorset or whatever, and you realize, like, oh my God, like, you read that without even thinking about it, and it makes you make a judgment on someone. And now I was seeing my parents' house, you know, the supposed house price, and you just think, this is so cynical, because you're very subconsciously making the reader come up with an idea of who this person is based on, like, the price of their parents' house.
Yeah.
I was also sexualized quite a lot in the media. It was not a lot, but certainly by some papers, and. So I remember coming out of that and thinking, wow, like, I was not prepared as, like, a 22-year-old girl just back from, like, this very spiritual, lovely, wholesome experience in the mountains to be thrown into the snake pit of the media. But again, like, you know, it wasn't that bad. You know, it wasn't like I was in the media for something awful. It was fine, really. But it gave me definitely an appreciation for people that go through it. It's full on.
So was it a bigger physical challenge or a bigger mental challenge?
What, for Everest? I'd say both. I mean, it definitely pushed me, like, the summit day especially, was really physically demanding. I think I had exhausted myself needlessly a little bit on that mountain. Again, my ego wanting to be quick. I had probably gone too fast lower down. And then by the time we got towards the summit, I was really tired. So, yeah, physically it was full on. I think mentally it was hard. But I just, as I said to you, I felt every day like I was so lucky to be there. Yeah. So there was never any question of, like, I hate this, I want to give up. It was just like, if only I could get to the summit, if I get the chance, you know. Yeah. So, yeah.
And were you at that age, before the world's beating you down, were you, like, positive, glass half full kind of girl anyway?
I guess maybe. Who knows? Yeah. You'd have to ask someone that knew me.
Yeah,
but
true.
I think I'd seen my parents, my dad and my stepdad, both self-employed, both run their own businesses, both really strong work ethic, and you know, I'd grown up around that, so I kind of had this idea that if you worked hard, like, things would come to you. Yeah. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. But being on Everest just kind of felt like, I know it's silly now, but it was like destiny. It was like, this was what I was born to do. I was always supposed to climb this mountain. That was weird, isn't it?
No, you know, I love that.
You know, that is weird, but I really felt like, on a spiritual level, I was meant to be there, which is just so wacky, but it was. And that's what kept me going, I guess, as well.
Yeah. You had to fulfill your destiny. Quitting wasn't part of the equation.
But if you think that, then it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I wish I probably thought like that for a few more things that I'm trying to work on.
Now you've had time, to reflect back on that. What did you learn about yourself and what you're capable of doing?
I learnt good things and bad things. I learnt, for instance, one of the bad things was that my ego does me no services at all. I feel like maybe it's because I'm a woman and it's quite male dominated in the mountains, but always this need to be first or to be fastest and to beat the guys, and it's just silly stuff. But for me, it kind of makes me feel like I deserve my place on the expedition, and I really had to work hard to actually say, no, if you come last to camp, you still deserve your place on the expedition. And that's been a real learning curve. Also, just being able to trust other people. There was an expedition in 2012, which I would say was like way bigger for me than Everest, to the world's fourth highest peak, Lhotse. And Lhotse is Everest, if you like. You have to climb up Lhotse to get to Everest. So at Camp 3 on Lhotse, you can either go up to Everest or you can carry on to the summit of Lhotse. And when I was on Everest, I thought, that's next, like going to the top of that mountain. It looks way more gnarly. Hardly anyone there. Like, wouldn't that be amazing? I went in 2012 and there was a huge avalanche that year in the Western Coombe. Everyone basically packed up and left the mountain. And Russell Bryce, one of the biggest providers, he pulled off like 100 clients and Sherpas off the peak, cancelled everyone's expedition for that year, said it's too dangerous. And I remember thinking, like, we're going home. There's no way we're staying. These conditions are just so bad. And Henry, our expedition organizer, he didn't climb. He was just at base camp. But he was like, Bonita, we're not going to give up just because Russell's gone, but Henry wasn't climbing. That's the thing. It's
right.
Like, Henry, life's not on the line. But I also trusted that I'd known him long enough to know that he wouldn't put us in a situation he didn't think we could succeed. So there was just a lot of, I don't know how we're going to pull this out the bag. Like, this is impossible on a different level. What's the point really in even trying? But I trust you, Henry, and we'll go for it. And we got to the top, and it was just amazing because there was no one there. They'd all gone home. And so learning that lesson about being able to sort of trust others, it was really key. Yeah.
And I always ask everybody this question: what was the one thing that you think you needed to be able to literally screw it, just do it and climb the goddamn mountain?
There were many of those moments. I think coming back from my first expedition to the Himalayas and my team sort of saying, yes, like, come to Everest in 6 months. It's going to be about 50 grand. And spending days like wallowing in self-pity, thinking I can't afford it. It's not fair. Like, what am I going to do? And then I remember just waking up one morning going, yeah, life's not fair. Like, get over it. No one's going to climb that mountain for you. Finding this money is your responsibility because it's your dream. And that was the moment. It was like, okay, we're going to make some cold calls and we're going to find 50 grand. So I think that was probably the biggest screw it, let's do it moment. And then again, probably for me on Lhotse, the one I just mentioned, like listening to Henry and him saying, I know everyone's gone home and they're telling you that it's suicidal to stay, but we're going to stay. And I remember thinking, yeah, screw it, let's stay. Let's see what happens. I think we're completely wrong and we're going to fall flat on our faces, but we'll stay. And yeah, those moments are exciting and scary, and I love them.
And what's the plan now then?
So as I mentioned, I've got a 7-month-old baby, a little boy, and I've also got a 5-year-old girl. So for the mountains, like, they're in the future. I think the oldest woman to climb Everest was in her 70s.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so there's like a long career ahead if
Yeah.
you want to for the mountains.
Yeah.
But there's other challenges. I'm writing a TV series at the moment. I've written a novel I'm trying to get published. Like,
Amazing.
there's lots of things going on, but they're not always mountaineering ones, just because at this point in life with kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as what's the saying? This too shall pass.
Yeah, if you look at having children like that.
Everything with kids, I just always,
Yeah.
remember it's just a phase.
It's just a phase.
And then there's another phase, and another phase.
Yeah. And you're in the teenage phase.
In the teenage phase, which is a very interesting phase. But you definitely, and I remember our friends who had kids before us telling us this, that there is light at the end of the the tunnel. But you do anything for your kids, and I love, for example, I love being in the mountains. I love being in the mountain snowboarding, and we were talking about it last night, funnily enough, and I was saying one of my kind of proudest moments was skiing in Italy and taking them down their first black run, and just looking behind me and seeing this like S shape coming down, and just thinking, and it was blue sky, the sun was out, and it was just one of those kind of like mental snapshots, and going like, yes, this is the rewarding bit,
Absolutely.
And not when they're trying to kill each other then at the meal in the evening, but for that moment in time.
It's so true. I mean, would you climb Everest? Would you leave your daughters and go and do something like that?
I think I would, because I don't know the risks. Even though I've spoken to you and I've spoken to, say, Jay, people like that, that's still in my mind. That doesn't feel like I could die. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Strangely, but that's a really good question. Yeah, would I? I would. Yeah, I would. Yeah.
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 See, it's such a more difficult question for me, I guess, having been there and seeing the avalanches up close,
exactly.
having fallen down crevasses, and having had altitude sickness. Like you when you're thinking about leaving your children, and especially as they're so young, I guess that makes it more difficult. Maybe, I don't know. But it's, for me, it's a real head, like, it's, I don't know what the next word is without swearing, but
you can swear. James Haskell came on, and literally within 5 minutes every other word was F. So ever since that moment,
it's a head fuck.
It's a head fuck. It's 100% head fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you really want to do this because it's beautiful, but at the same time, like, knowing the risks, I'm like, but what if? And what's that what if that eats away at you? I guess the thing is, like, I'm going to start out climbing again. I'm not going to go for the most dangerous thing I can think of. I'm going to start and build up, and so watch this space.
And maybe it's that thing with many things in life. Like, people now go to me like, because I after I ran New York Marathon, well, I did a marathon during lockdown on my own, then did New York Marathon, and then started training for London. Got about 5 different injuries, and then about a month before last year, quit because I just couldn't see.
Yeah.
And also because I also think in my mind, when I did the New York Marathon, it was to complete a marathon with other people rather than just doing it on my own. Like, there is proof, not just my Strava, that I did this marathon. I didn't stop it on the way, and all those kinds of things. So in my mind, it was never an option that I wouldn't do it, that I wouldn't complete it, even though it was an absolute head fuck again, because there was a heat wave in November in New York. Everything goes out the window that you prepared for. What's the worst thing that can happen? It's normally 7 degrees. It's 27. Things. So people being carted into ambulances from like mile 8. And again, ego. I went off too quickly. Despite the last message I read from someone who'd done loads of marathons, don't go off too quickly. And then you see these people running past you,
and you're excited and you're fit. So those first miles are so easy, aren't they, when you train?
Yeah.
But you forget about mile 20 to mile 26.
You do, you're not thinking about mile 20 at that point. So then people then go, well, what's the point of doing another marathon? You've done a marathon, you've ticked that off your list, so you don't have to do New York. So in my head, I don't think I had something bigger, a bigger purpose for me to kind of battle through those 5 injuries that I had to do it. And then now I'm like, you can do it next April. We've still got your place. And then it's like, I'm still battling in my mind going, do I do it? Do I not do it? I need something bigger to do it. So do I do it for charity, for example, or do I?
You've got to set yourself a time goal, maybe.
Yeah.
Something to get excited about, that's hard.
Yeah, I think you're right. What's the hardest thing you've done in your life then? Was it K2? Was it Everest? What's the hardest challenge?
I think for me, it was actually coming down from Everest, getting injured. I fell, and then you're just feeling really low when I got back home because I felt like I'd messed up. Like, my team helped me get back to Camp 4, and I just, thought like, oh my God, I put them at risk. Like, there's nothing worse. And so coming home and being celebrated by the media is this great success, but actually feeling internally sort of like, wow, but it kind of, didn't go as planned. I got into a real hole over that. Lifting myself out of it was just about like, going, okay, will I climb again ever? Like, do I have the courage to go back and like risk that happening again?
Yeah.
And the answer was yes, but start small, start just climbing sea cliffs down in Swanage. It's just do little things, just reconnect with why you started. And I guess like that then built up to going on bigger expeditions. And then in 2012, the hardest one I'd ever done was intentionally the hardest I'd ever done, because I felt like I'd learned so much from Everest. I wanted to do something really super tough to kind of show that I'd learned everything that I needed to.
Yeah.
And so we went Lhotse, and Lhotse really did serve up a challenge, like with the avalanches and the bad conditions and everyone leaving and like getting messages saying you're suicidal, like don't listen to Henry. But we had our little team, and despite everyone telling us we were insane, we carried on, and it worked out. And it was just, so that was the hardest mentally, to come from a very low point 2 years earlier to build up to it. And until that last step onto the summit, it was impossible. We were going to fail, but let's just see how far we can get.
Yeah. That's another whole podcast there, I think, from that feeling of what, having climbed Everest but not having that kind of feeling of elation, and then getting yourself back up to go again is a whole nother podcast. But last question I'll say, for those who are listening, watching, who want to get from where they currently are in life, whatever that might be, to where they want to be, and they might not necessarily be able in their own minds to take that first step. They're procrastinating, they're putting obstacles in front of themselves, fear of failure. What would you say to those people? Any advice that you could finish up with?
I'd just go with what helped me get going, which is you've got to have a really clear vision of where you're going. What is it you want? What does it look like? Okay, is it the leather on the seats or the private jet? If that works for you, that's fine. For me, it was getting to the top of the world. And that was exciting and amazing, but it was also terrifying. And I think it was the terror of it that got me off my backside and got me to work. And so I think that's why I said to you, set yourself a time goal, something that, is scary, because it gets you to work. Not
a comfortable goal.
Yeah, because if it's like, oh, I could do it, I could just run it again in any time or whatever. Set yourself a challenge. Like, you can do hard things. Like, that's what I think we all need, is like that kick up the backside where it's like, wow, I'm accountable. I can set myself this hard thing. So that would be my advice, like the vision and also the fear. You need both.
It. And I'm not going to run the marathon in like a rhino suit or like some people do.
No.
That doesn't appeal.
A fridge maybe, though.
Could eat the contents of the fridge.
Yeah.
Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching this episode of Screw It, Just Do It. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below this video, as this episode helped move you closer to where you want to be. All that I ask is that if you enjoyed this episode and that it's moved you closer to getting to where you want to be, that you share this episode so that it helps one other person do just the same. Just ask yourself, what small action will move you forward to get you from where you are, and screw it and just do it. Until next time.